Hi, I'm Alvin Drew. I'm an astronaut. This is Ask NASA, and I'm here to answer your questions. So who is going to the moon with NASA? It's going to be a lot of folks. It's going to be our own industry helping us get there. It's all going to be our international partners, many of whom have been with us on the International Space Station, plus a few others.
First question asked, who's going with NASA to the moon? And they said, NASA's going with NASA to the moon. And some others, other people from other places, others. First question asked on Ask NASA, not answered. Thank you, NASA, never a straight answer.
Who's building the gateway? Well, for those of you not familiar, this is the gateway. Lots of folks are going to build this. Different companies are going to build these things. Different countries are going to contribute. This part here with the legs on it is the part that takes off and lands from the surface of the moon.
But who's going to build it? You just were asked, who is going to build this system, this craft? Others? People? Places? Countries? Who? What businesses? What countries? What people? The question again was not answered. Never a straight answer.
And then finally, this is a transition stage to get us across that 50,000 mile gap between the gateway and the moon. The gateway
50,000 miles? So they're only going 170,000 miles out.
You have a vehicle out there that can talk to it no matter what it is, no matter what country you're from. You can plug into it. You can get power, you can get data, and then you become part of the gateway. The gateway will work a lot like the International Space Station. We'll assemble it using a robotic arm.
It's because it's the next International Space Station. It will be where the other one is. Every 25 years we replace one. 2024 is the 25th year mark. It's going to fall.
We're not going to go anywhere without our partners with us. It's going to take a crew to get us to Mars. Another example of our international partnership is the International Space Station. 19 nations in total is what it took to make that space station is what it is today.
So who's going with? People. Again, the third one in a row. No answers.
So what's the next question here? Is this a modern space race? Well, yes and no. Yes, we're up against the clock, but no, we're not racing against each other. This is more of a part.
Wait, up against the clock? What clock? Like, you have only until 2024 because why? Because the military budget is ending in 2024, the International Space Station is going to decay. Russia and China just signed a treaty together to put up the next one themselves, and we're not allowed to be a part of it, and so we're having to work with anyone who will work with us, others, to try to figure out exactly how we can create our own, but we have to either build it way above or way below. As we know from Skylab versus the Mir, Skylab fell down and the Mir never did for 25 years until Russia replaced it with the International Space Station when Bill Clinton in '97 gave them international trade, and we were allowed to be a part of that next one. Well, since we're not a part of this next one, because we just were kicked out of this new space treaty, well, like in '67, when we're just like, Uncle, you shot up the first one, you shot up the first human, you went the first orbital path around, you've made it into the thermosphere beyond the mesosphere and suborbital transit, you did it all first, but we're going to go to the moon, so we'll be the winners because, see, we went the furthest out and you didn't. When that's nonsense, and they knew it, and everyone knows it, so that's not what the space race is about. That's why Neil Tyson deGrasse will go off on Stephen Colbert's show about it's about military dominance of technology. As in this new space race, they put up the first 5G network, they put up the first gamma ray telescopes, they're the first ones to be able to do everything because, well, they have the Soyuz that has a perfect, rate, hasn't killed anyone, unlike our space stations. Didn't fucking stay up, they fell down. Our shuttles have exploded. The Apollo burnt people on the launch pad. It's inevitably shown that we are not as good as them. So there is no space race unless we just make up a moon landing. Which, how well is that going? Here's them explaining how it's going.
Partnership, a relay race that involves our domestic industry as well as our international partners.
You can't work with your partners against the clock when they have kicked you out of where they're building their next one. You can't be against the clock, but only against the clock because they're not doing it with you next time, but be doing it with them. This doesn't make any sense. That was completely nonsensical what he said. And yes, there's a new space race. We're losing, just like we were losing the last space race. And this is the best they can do. Either coming up with a fake moon landing again, because they're in the thermosphere and they can't go any further past, but they can't admit that Russia owns and has always owned space, always has done it best, and now has sided with, with China and some of the other larger space-bearing nations like India, Saudi Arabia, Jerusalem, these now very active nations in space. They're all working with each other, but not so much with us. We are occasionally lending our technologies that we might still have some dominance over, mostly software, but even that is starting to fail as, the progression of 5G consists.
So how does going into space influence you? It's a tiny, tiny little island in the middle of the great big black sea. There's no little yellow boundary line separating our countries from one another.
That's all I need to point out everything I've been saying. My metaphors throughout all of my videos have been exactly the same as both sides. Now, the flat earther and the duck and cover, in my opinion, those groups of people are the same. If you think we went to the moon, you're a duck and cover people. You use Bert the Turtle to explain that radiation isn't a big deal, and you try to justify it with the Van Allen belts, completely ignoring the fact that 99% of mass and energy curves around the bow shock and never even enters our magnetosphere to be a part of the Van Allen belts, which is an outdated term because there's a dozen plus fucking bands now and we don't call them the Van Allen belts. They each individually have names. Plasmasphere and magnetosheath. We talk about the neutral point in the magnetosphere's tail, not just a donut ring of radiation anymore. There's lots to explain. All of these invisible things that we first discovered in 1957. Well, those duck and cover kids like to use the Van Allen belts to be like, oh, well, we just fly through them really fast. Into 100% of the mass, if you're saying 1% of the mass that makes it through and is just going through electromagnetic reconnection, which yes, makes turbulent plasma, but no different than the electromagnetic reconnection that's happening outside of the bow shock from the sun's magnetospheric bands, the same thing's occurring. So yeah, it's 100% of the mass out there. So while the duck and cover kids are using Bert the Turtle to try and say that radiation isn't real, they're arguing against the flat earthers who are like, no, we're on the back of a turtle, man, and we're protected by this firmament. See, it's keeping the sea of radiation away from us as we just float through it. They're both saying the same fucking things. I'm sitting back being like, that is an apt metaphor you're both using, because yes, see, it's like we're a pebble in a river, but we have this shield keeping all the water off of us, and it's like every now and then we get this dew that accumulates on the inside of our invisible bubble, and then that explodes into atomization, one drop of it, and we get a little bit of the mist from that atomization, and that's the aurora borealis, and that's the radiation that allows life to exist. Why it's a good thing we have some of the radiation, just not all of it. Why we're not Mars. The end. So
we really are all together here on this one island in the middle of nowhere.
We're really all together in this. Whether we're saying, oh, flat earth, or Bert the Turtle duck and cover, whether it's the Make America Great Again, or the fucking Dark Ages again, whatever it is that the groups decide to be and how they come together, they're all saying the same fucking thing. And that is cosmic background radiation and solar energetic particles of all the types, of all sorts, all 26 elements that we're familiar with and based out of, exist at phenomenal levels, at speeds that we can't fathom. The energy and mass that exists outside of the magnetosphere cannot be competed with as the energy and mass we are, so we cannot go into it. And we are alone, and we are truly bonded to each other by this, that we are just a film on a rock stuck in a sea, like he's describing, and every single philosopher and every single scientist and every single person has said before this. So that's it. So yeah, this is Ask NASA, and this is what they are up to now. This is a channel that they just started. It's linked to their .gov. They have a YouTube channel here, obviously, that is their specific channel that they use to upload all of their videos that they put on their .gov sites. This specific channel was just created because of Brad Pitt and the new Ad Astra movie. It's because the Lucy in the Sky movie is starting to make everybody aware that all of these men who just stated what he stated about going into space, it's scary for them, and it's life-changing. And if you don't go insane, you'll really appreciate and embrace that we are what we are, and we are not Mars. Because it's a miracle. It's just luck. It's whatever you want to call it. A scientific anomaly. I'm cool with it, whatever we want to call it, as long as we just acknowledge what it is, work towards anything we can do about it, and try desperately to just stay while it's here. And that's it. So, Lucy in the Sky, I think that's going to be a good movie. This Ad Astra, this is what you get. Never a straight answer, duck and cover propaganda, a fucking space race that inevitably we've already lost. The end.